Welcome, Lloyd, here to Copenhagen. We had yesterday the pleasure to have you in the Truth Seminar, where you kept a very wonderful lecture about the Starchild skull, and you focused a lot on the scientific analysis of the data, which is always can be, let's say, difficult to get around in such a lecture because the audience might not be on that level of understanding. But I think you did it really well. And now what I would like to hear is more, let's say, the impact of what do you believe is the impact on the social and cultural level from this research you have been doing. Have you, like, say, made some observation already of what could be the impact of such a discovery also in the scientific world?
Well, obviously we've been working on this for 13 years, almost 14 years now, so we've given a considerable thought to what would happen once the Starchild is firmly established as an alien being on the Earth, living here, dying here, being buried here 900 years ago. So there was at least once when that happened, for sure, and the Starchild will establish that. So it's going to provide, unfortunately, not as dramatic an impact as the proverbial UFO landing on the White House lawn, or a UFO hovering over a football stadium somewhere in the world, or something that is just so utterly undeniable that there's no way for the mainstream, those who keep such information suppressed, to keep it suppressed. It would have to come out. Well, that's a complete, overnight, dramatic change in everybody's reality. What the Starchild provides, and I believe the reason I've been allowed to move forward with it in the way that I have, is that it provides a halfway point toward full disclosure. It allows those who want to believe in UFOs and aliens to say, well, okay, yes, they were here once, and that means that all of the sightings and everything mean that they're still here and still with us. But those conservative voices, those people who are afraid of the future, who always want to look to the past and say, I wish everything around me now was the way it was when I was growing up. And the world is filled with people like this, who don't look to the future, who look to the past. And those conservative voices will be able to say, in terms of the Starchild, well, okay, once 900 years ago, but that doesn't mean right now. That doesn't mean that all these people saying that they see UFOs and all, that they know anything and that it's true. So I think the Starchild provides a perfect middle step for those in authority to bring a large portion of us into the reality of alien existence, but it leaves behind those who don't want to go. Because if the UFO lands on the White House lawn, those that don't want to go have a very dramatic emotional experience to live through. And I think that the Starchild provides a good transition to give everybody a way to slide toward full disclosure at some point in the future. That's how I see it.
You mentioned here that, let's say, that's why it has been allowed for you to do your work, and you also mentioned yesterday that there has, concerning the research laboratorium, that there had been done some forgery or mistakes, but kind of very serious mistakes, which is like questionable if it has been done on purpose.
Right. Well, that was back in 1999. I don't see any problems with the labs that we're working with now. But in 1999, pressure was applied to a lab to give a phony result that made the Starchild look like it was just a human. It was what the mainstream wanted to hear, and so that was the result that was given. We knew by 2003 that that result was false, was phony. But still to this day, mainstream scientists who are against the Starchild, who are conservative and want to keep things the way they are with no change, they still refer back to that original phony test as the result for the Starchild, that it was a human. And that's just not true. But this This is the way the mainstream works. There are people who are on the belief that they are honest and fair and judicious in the way they go about their business, and none of that is true. They are as human, and they have petty issues and petty desires and petty habits, small-minded, just like everybody else. They just happen to have PhD after their name, but that doesn't inoculate them from being human and having all of the human foibles that the rest of us have.
I would like to hear the connection with the Starchild skull and the so-called long skulls, because there have, let's say, also been a lot of diggings and archaeological founds in South America, other places with the so-called long skulls, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. What is your theory or your point of view upon this? I mean, why haven't you gone further from the Starchild skull and involved these other skulls which has been found around the world?
Well, actually, you're just not aware of it, but I have, and we don't call them long skulls. I've actually never heard that term before. Everyone I know calls them cone heads. Cone heads. But yes, those are the ones with the heads that extend up here, dominantly in Peru, but they've been found in Malta and Egypt and other places around the world. And the cone heads, what distinguishes them from us is, of course, the largeness of their brains. They carried a brain that was literally twice the size of our brain. We average about 1,400 cubic centimeters. They average between 2,800 and 3,000. So they have very big brain relative to ours, and we know that was brain because when you x-ray their heads, you can see the vein marks all the way up. So they were normal at that size, which means they're not human. So whatever the cone heads were, they weren't human like us. They were something else. But there are also some physical differences in the jaw and in their teeth. And while they have human-like faces, they're going to turn out to be not entirely human, whatever they are. Now, I am working with a man named Brian Forster who lives in Peru and who has access to at least a couple of hundred years ago by his work in a museum down in Paracas, Peru. So he has sent me a number of samples that I have then forwarded to my geneticist, and we are working on figuring out what the cone heads are. But the problem with the cone heads is that their remains are much more damaged, much more desiccated, much more contaminated by bacteria, the bacteria of death and otherwise, than is the Starchild, because the Starchild was buried in a mine tunnel in Mexico 900 years ago. So for 900 years, up until 1930, it stayed in what was the equivalent today of a climate-controlled storage locker. Climate control where they have air conditioning and heat so that the temperature is always the same. So if you store your objects in this storage locker, they're going to be fresh. They won't ever get too hot, ever get too cold, climate-controlled. And that's what a cave or a mine tunnel is. So the Starchild its bone is very well conserved. And what we have found, or what our geneticist has found from the first couple of rounds of attempting to work with the conehead bone, is it's very much more degraded. It's going to be very much more difficult to work with. Not impossible. Don't misunderstand. It's not impossible. We can get all the answers we need out of the coneheads in the same way we can get those answers out of the Starchild, but it's going to take a little more time and trouble and effort to recover from the coneheads what will be fairly easy to recover from the Starchild.
We were talking earlier about Sitchin today, and I would like to know your, let's say, relation with Sitchin and his theories, and also to find, let's say, what is the connection, because as I see your work with the book about everything is wrong with the hominoids, everything, I mean, you were talking about yesterday to connect it, that now you're working with the Starchild skull, but isn't it already connected? I mean, this work is kind of a continuity from the work with the hominoids, the research about this. Could you give us, let's say, our synthesis of what is the connection between these different areas of research?
Well, with the work of Zecharia Sitchin, What he deals with is life on Earth from about 300,000 years ago until now. And in those 300,000 years, he's dealing with the writings of the Sumerians of about 5,000 years ago, in which they put down on clay tablets their understanding of their own history and the reality of the world as it was told to them by their gods, by their multiple gods living with them at that time in Sumer. And what those gods essentially told them, the story they told them was, we gods created you, the Adamu, A-M-U, the Adamu, about 200,000 years ago, to be our slaves and our servants. And we created not just you, but all domesticated plants and animals. And it is a fact that all domesticated plants and animals do all tend to appear around 10,000 years ago, in a window of 10,000 years around that. So, and the gods claim that they did that to give themselves their ease on this planet, meaning they're from another place. They come to this planet. It's not really suited to them biologically, so they take what's here and they modify that to be things that they can use in terms of the domesticated plants and animals. And then there are, in some instances, they seem to bring things in from their planet, things like coconuts and bananas that have just no record on Earth. They just, boom, they appear, and one day in the fossil record there's no trace of it, and then another day they're there. So some things they domesticated by, they created by genetic engineering what was here, and other things they just brought here because they knew that it would survive in this environment. So that's Sitchin's work. My work was about hominoids and human origins based on the research of hominoids, which is Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, everybody knows those terms, and Yeti is one for the abominable snowman, and Sasquatch is one for Bigfoot. But there are actually four kinds. There's the giant kind, which is Bigfoot, Sasquatch. There's a man-sized kind, abominable snowman, Yeti, and they are very primitive and they live only in the Himalayas. And then there are two other kinds, another man-sized kind, generically called almas, which are much more human-like, but still primates, upright. We're talking about upright walking primates, bipedal primates, but still covered with hair. Imagine upright walking chimps or gorillas. That's what the hominoids are. That's what the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, all those, that's what they are. So they're the almas, and then the last kind are the Siddhapas, Agagui Siddhapas, whatever you want to call them, and they are the pygmies. They are about 4 feet tall and live in the band of jungle around the equator. The other three live in the deep forests and swamps and jungles too of the world that are left. Most people are surprised to learn that humans dominate on only about 50% of the planet, of the arable land of the earth. If you strip away the deserts, strip away the tundras, talking about the arable land, the land where something can live on it, half of that is all humans live on, dominate. The other half belongs to the hominoids. And there is in the fossil record, there's clear evidence of bipedal primates going back as far as 20 million years. Now, mainstream science, very few of them will acknowledge that truth. There's a book called The Upright Ape by Dr. Aaron Filler that goes over it in considerable scientific detail, the proof of upright walking primates as far back as 20 million years ago. But if you have upright walking primates 20 million years ago, 10 million years ago, 8 million years ago, and our own archaeologists and geologists and anthropologists are acknowledging now that it looks to them like the first upright walking, what they call prehumans, occur at about 6 million years ago. So you've got the ones that they don't accept at 20 million, 10 million, 8 million. They start accepting them at 6 million on down. The reality of it is those are not pre-humans. Those are hominoids continuing on from 20 million years ago, living right on and living to today. That's what the Bigfoot and the rest of them are just those upright walking primates from the Miocene, that era of 20 million years to 5 million years ago. It's called the Miocene. And they're just part of the Miocene apes. So what I did, you asked, the question was, yes, where does my work fold in with Sitchin's? my work was the front end of what he didn't have. I could provide a front end that he didn't have, and he could provide a back end that I didn't have. I could tell that humans didn't evolve on Earth, but I didn't know where we came from. I didn't have a logical, believable, sort of fact-based reason for where we came from and when. He had all of that. I didn't have the front end of what he had, the front of the 300, how did we get to the 300,000 year mark? He didn't have that. So what I did, and everything you know is wrong, is I put those two things together, my own work about hominoids and human origins, and I put it together with his work about human origins, and came up with something new and different, and that was richer because it had a broader canvas. And so that's how it all fits together, I think, in a way that is believable to anyone that reads it.
So your work now with the Starchild skull is, let's say, is an addition to this work, in the sense that if it will be acknowledged in the scientific fields, official fields, I guess it will be very close to also acknowledging, at least considering and starting to research in Sitchin's work, in your work as well.
Well, yes, I think that what will happen is with the Starchild, it will open the gates for mainstream scientists to look at these, right now, forbidden areas of research. Right now, a mainstreamer simply can't study Sitchin, can't take Sitchin seriously, can't take me seriously, can't study what I do, because it's just forbidden. If you do that, you're not one of us. If you as a mainstream scientist take any of that seriously, that we have already declared off limits, that we've already made a decision about. We have made a decision that UFOs aren't real. We have made a decision that aliens aren't real. We have made a decision that hominoids are not real. All of these things cannot be talked about, cannot be researched. You can't even think about them in a positive way. That's the rule among mainstream scientists. What the Starchild can do is just throw that rule out the window, just absolutely demolish it, get rid of it. So then younger scientists who aren't as who maybe want to make their reputation and are more intellectually curious than their elders, they are the ones who are most likely to start exploring these topics in a very serious way. And I think very, very good research will come out of that, and a complete overhaul of our understanding of who and where we are and what our place in the universe is will eventuate from those younger scientists having the shackles removed from their minds so that they can explore all the possibilities that people like me and Sitchin and many others are exploring, which is that truth about us.
So your work in this connection, do you also see it as a let's say fine balance between reaching the public, but also reaching into the scientific world?
I try to reach into the public as much as I can, but I don't bother with science. I've talked to enough of them. I know what the score is with them. They are just simply forbidden from considering this kind of stuff. So while they may, on an individual basis, speak to me in private, there's no way that they're going to go to a lecture where other scientists might be there and see them there, and just they could be excommunicated from being a scientist for attending a lecture like the kind that I give, because it's so volatile and it's so damaging to their mainstream position. They just simply can't afford to do that, and I don't think they're going to do it. Ordinary people, they don't have those constraints on them, so I work hard at communicating to ordinary people too. But the big hurdle with ordinary people is that they're very thoroughly brainwashed by the mainstream people who say that UFOs aren't real, aliens aren't real, Bigfoot isn't real, and they drumbeat it so often that the majority of people believe that that's true, believe that scientists know what they're talking about when they say that hominoids aren't real, Starchild isn't real, on and on. So people have to think for themselves, but they're not good about thinking for themselves. And because they're not good about thinking for themselves, I have to really, really have material that just overwhelms you. just overwhelms you, or you're not going to be impressed. And I think that's where we are now. I think we have some very overwhelming material.
It seems to be a generalized, let's say, pattern. Also, yesterday at a Truth seminar, we had Nils Hyde talking about the same situation, that if he would be in a scientific forum in front of all his colleagues, they will not be able to, let's say, put up easy lies, because they have their colleagues sitting next to them and they cannot lie about certain physical facts. So somehow the door to getting these things acknowledged, it has to go through the scientific world, doesn't it? Or can it reach to the public?
You're making it sound like they get to make a choice. They'll never make a choice in our favor. That won't happen. What we have to do is literally cram it down their throats. We have to force them to tolerate it. We have to treat them like little children, where you just sit them down at a plate of food they don't want to eat and sit there till they eat it. That's kind of what we have to do with scientists in terms of the Starchild. They will never gracefully accept it. We have to prove it so overwhelmingly. We have to recover its DNA of its genome so thoroughly, and compare it so thoroughly, and present our material to the world and write it up so thoroughly, so properly, that that the mainstream conservative voices have no choice. They have nothing to say. They have nothing left to say. They have to give up and just let it go, that they've lost this round. And then once that happens, as I said, the older ones, they will just have to take a seat on the sideline, and the younger ones will be the ones who will seize this information and develop it and turn it into an acceptable body of knowledge over time.
I can't help thinking then, what is the difference between our age today and, let's say, the Renaissance or the Middle Age? You were showing a slide yesterday with Kepler, with Copernicus and so on, Columbus, and I mean, is this where we are? Is this the scale of change we will see?
I think what I was talking about in the presentation yesterday was that Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo in the 1500s moved the Earth from what everyone believed was the center of the universe, the center of everything, and they were able to prove that no, it just rotated around a sun. It was one planet of several around the sun, and that the sun itself was just part of many other suns, and that in fact Earth was not the center of anything, not even our solar system. So that was horribly shocking to a lot of people in the 1500s, who just thoroughly accepted that Earth was the end-all be-all. So we will face some of that with the Starchild, where there will be that same kind of trauma for a lot of people to accept that aliens are real and that we are part of a galactic community, that we're not here alone and we never have been. That's going to be a major emotional crunch for a lot of people, but they will get through it, and they will change. And as I was saying before, the good thing about doing it the way we're doing it with the Starchilds is it creates a partial result that allows those who are really resistant to the idea to kind of come up on it slowly, to kind of adjust to it slowly, whereas those who are excited about this kind of stuff, they can just jump right in and say, God, aliens are real. Finally, we've known it all along, but now we have proof. And so to me, it's a good thing and a good situation and a good scenario for both sides, those who normally support these kinds of things and those who don't.
And how long will it take?
With the Starchild, from the time we're funded, and we need a considerable amount of funding, but once we get it, and we will get it eventually, from the time we get it to the time we get the result of our mitochondrial DNA will be probably 4 to 6 months, because the first month or two is going to have to go to just getting ourselves arranged, getting companies set up, doing all of that. But let's say 4 to 6 months for the mitochondrial DNA result, and a year to 18 months for the nuclear DNA. Mitochondrial DNA, everybody should know, is only 16,569 base pairs long. and the nuclear DNA is 3 billion base pairs long. So it's going to take a considerably longer time to get the nuclear DNA, but in the end we'll have both, and we'll be able to lay it down against the human genome, and we'll be able to show all the hundreds and thousands of places where it's different, and not just different from human life on Earth, different from anything that we have on the planet. It's going to be really an amazing thing that we're going to be able to prove with this.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, and thank you so much for attending the True seminar here in Copenhagen.
My pleasure. Look for the next 6 months to a year, big announcements within 6 months to a year, I'm sure.
Thank you.